welcome to the podcast. It's the Talk-o-nomics podcast brought to you by Amazix. Welcome. We have a special guest, Eric Wall. I'm very happy that you took the time to show up. Thanks a lot. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
So Eric has been in the space for quite a while. I've read some of your articles. You write a lot about cryptocurrencies and about privacy specifically a lot. You also mentioned that you're a cryptocurrency Darwinist. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised that you found that actually, because it was, I think, over a year that since I called myself a crypto Darwinist. But so the general concept of a Darwinist is that you have a sort of Darwinian theory for cryptocurrencies. So you look at the cryptocurrency space, and the main realization that I had looking at this space is that cryptocurrencies behave a little bit like very primitive forms of digital life. So when you look at a system like Bitcoin, it is in a way self-sustaining. I mean, Bitcoin provides a service to the human species by being valuable and then providing a censorship-resistant features, and because of that, people mine Bitcoin. And as long as Bitcoin provides this valuable service, and because it's decentralized, it's going to keep doing that, and it's going to keep maintaining itself, sort of like a bacteria or a mushroom that just lives in sort of harmony with the ecosystem. So if you have the perspective that cryptocurrencies are like primitive digital life forms, and then it becomes a bit like Darwinism to see which ones survive and how do they evolve. And if you look at the projects over time, many of them clone features from other projects, they merge with each other, and it's the one with the features that are good for survival that eventually survive. So you can have sort of this evolution theory on cryptocurrencies when you observe them. So that's how I look at the space, basically.
Okay, wow, sounds interesting. So basically, following that logic, we should expect better currencies coming over time and surpassing Bitcoin?
Yeah, well,
in that sense?
not necessarily. I mean, if you look at something like a shark, for instance, it's been around for hundreds of millions of years because the shark was perfectly suited for its purpose. Mm-hmm. So there are some configurations of life forms that have advantages that can last for millennia, and there are some that don't last for even a decade. So I think that we'll see the same thing in cryptocurrencies. Some models are very strong, like a proof of work system has very strong fundamentals, and then there are other systems which are weaker, which may not survive. But we will definitely see some cryptocurrencies deteriorate and disappear and vanish from the evolutionary chart, so to speak.
Yeah, makes sense. So I'm always asking this question because blockchain as an industry is relatively young, and many people I'm speaking to usually did something else before getting into blockchain. So what were you doing pre-blockchain space?
Yeah, I was studying computer science, and I was a penetration tester, internet security, but I was at university, and it was actually during my university years that I discovered Bitcoin and blockchain technology and decided to specialize myself in that domain. So I never really got out of academia before discovering cryptocurrencies. I did work for companies I worked for Microsoft as a software engineer, and I worked also for a camera company called Axis, which develops security cameras, which is kind of funny because So I used to test and develop surveillance cameras. Now I work with privacy issues, which is where like the purpose is to protect people's privacy. So it's sort of the opposite of what I was doing before.
Yeah, I see. So when you discovered Bitcoin, how did you discover it, and what really attracted you to sort of decide that you want to do more in the space?
So it was an article that a friend sent to me in 2011, and I remember that it was about the darknet, and I remember that when I first read the article, I was a bit upset with myself because I wanted to have discovered it on my own, and I didn't want.
Okay.
I sort of felt like this phenomenon. I mean, Silk Road was already around at the time, and it was a very interesting phenomenon that showed like what you can do with technology and privacy technologies, and I was kind of upset with myself that I hadn't. Obviously, I was in the wrong circles, and I didn't get the information firsthand. So I remember looking at it, and I thought to myself that I should pick up some Bitcoin probably, but I didn't do it for 1 year. I just left it as something on my to-do list because I had many other things to do. And then 1 year later, I came back to it and I decided to acquire some. And then it was the price gyrations that got me interested, and I thought to myself, is this something that I can predict the movements of? Is there any way that I can trade this and make a profit? So I kind of got into Bitcoin as a trader initially, and learning like the ropes of technical analysis. Later I discovered that the tools that I was using and that most of the traders at the time were using are these technical analysis tools. And if you look at the scientific research on many of those indicators that people use to predict the price, there isn't that much scientific rigor to those models.
Yeah.
So I transitioned to trying to understand, is there any other way that I can predict the nature of the price movements of these things? And I found that if you understand the technology, if you know what's going on in the technological development, you can sort of spot the trends that gets people excited in the space. Because at that time, it was the technological features, and it still is today, that gets people excited about cryptocurrencies. Okay, so this one has this specific technical setup that makes it more scalable or more private, and that makes people invest in those cryptocurrencies. So it was from the desire to allocate my assets to the cryptocurrencies that would do well that I started reading the mailing lists and getting into the very nitty-gritty. And I found a nice sort of merging with my education at the time, which was at the Lund University, the Faculty of Engineering there, where we had courses that were specifically like the components that are used in cryptocurrencies, such as Merkle trees and other cryptographic primitives, were included in the course material. So I began studying all the courses that would enable me to better understand what's going on in the cryptocurrency space.
Okay, makes sense. So basically, based on what you're saying, I understand that technical analysis by themselves are not enough in order to make an accurate kind of predictions for the price movement. What are the other components on top of it that you were piling up to predict the prices?
Yes, so just a little bit more on that. So what I was doing specifically was looking at which technical analysis indicators that were the most popular ones in the cryptocurrency trading community. Mm-hmm. And you would see something like MACD, convergence, divergence in the indexes. And so like the 3-day MACD was something that people relied on heavily in the trading community. And I began using that in my own trading strategy. But then when I eventually learned how to backtest these models, I programmed a bot to trade, and I looked at the data. So like, how would this bot have performed if you look at all the data? And I didn't find any conclusive evidence that the parameters and the indicators that people were looking at actually produced reliable results. It was looking at random walks. It was pretty much random.
So they were using it because everyone else was using it.
Yeah, but there was no scientific or evidence that they had even performed well in the past. Okay. So if they're not even performing well in the past, why should they perform well in the future? Mm-hmm. Now, what I did find strong correlations with is that if a project has a team that understands the technology and is innovating, that is doing something that distinguishes one project from another, for example, by using some unique cryptography that preserves privacy or achieve scalability in a certain way, if you detect those projects before other people do, if you are able to understand where the innovation is happening and you allocate your assets there in before other people are doing it, mm-hmm. then that's by far the best way to make a good return on your investment.
Yeah, makes sense. So you're also very interested in the privacy side of things, and you've been writing a lot about privacy and protecting privacy and the blockchain and privacy in general together. So why is it so important for you? Why specifically this angle of looking at the blockchain?
Well, keep in mind though that I'm a technologist purely, and I actually got more interested in privacy as a technological challenge than a humanitarian cause initially. But I was contacted by the Human Rights Foundation while I was an engineer at a fintech company where we were developing blockchain solutions for the financial industry, but also building exchanges for cryptocurrency exchanges, like matching engines for cryptocurrency exchanges. I was working as the blockchain lead there for a company called Cinnober, which is now since then acquired by NASDAQ. But so I just went around in this space, very interested in cryptocurrencies. I had presentations about my views, and I was contacted by a man called Alex Gladstein, who's the CSO of the Human Rights Foundation. So he reached out to me and said, that he's fallen down the Bitcoin rabbit hole, and that he wants to bring the knowledge and benefits of cryptocurrencies to the humanitarian community, the activist community, but also spread it widely among the people living in authoritarian nations, how they can use cryptocurrencies and what are the aspects of them. So what was difficult for I think people that watched cryptocurrency from the sidelines and understood that there's value there but couldn't really navigate the space, it's very difficult to find truth in the industry, to know, okay, so everybody says that they have the best technology and that they are the most decentralized and they have the best privacy features.
And they're going to disrupt the whole world with their projects.
So it's you got to find somebody. If you are like a humanitarian organization, you need to find somebody that you can completely trust, that this person has his own passion. He doesn't have his own agenda. He's technologically competent, but he's also very objective and neutral. And I think that's what led Alex to contacting me, because I've never had any specific bias in the industry. I only look at the technologies, and I'm curious about all the cryptocurrencies. I don't say, a lot of people consider me to be a Bitcoin maximalist, but that's because Bitcoin has some features to it that makes it unique, and I really believe in Bitcoin as a project and where it is. But that doesn't exclude me from looking at other coins. And when I look at another coin, I will compare it objectively, because I'm just trying to find the truth and the best currencies, because at the end of the day, I'm trying to allocate my assets. And if I have a bias or an agenda, then it's only going to make me, it's only going to hurt myself in the end. So this was how Alex Gladstein came in contact with me. And Alex himself is, he's very inspirational when he talks about how Bitcoin can help people in other countries. You really feel, if you listen to one of his presentations, you're really going to feel that, okay, what have I been doing? I'm only caring about these selfish things,
price
like, I'm only caring about how can I increase my capital. But when you look at how large of an impact something like Bitcoin could have to actually bring people out of economic oppression in different areas, you realize that, okay, maybe I could actually dedicate my time to doing something more valuable. So there's a huge leverage effect. Like the work that I can do for the Human Rights Foundation, it has impact that exceeds something that I could do otherwise. This feels like it has so much more potential, because you can teach a whole country. You can teach a whole country how to use cryptography and how to claim their financial sovereignty. That's a huge thing. I don't think there's anything that I could be working on that would feel as empowering as that's doing.
Yeah.
So I haven't been that deep into the privacy community before. But I looked at it technically, and I've been writing articles about how it works at the technical level, and it's really intellectually challenging, because privacy is more difficult than, achieving privacy is many times more difficult than achieving something like decentralization. Because with privacy, there are so many different angles that you can expose yourself at. And if you only do it once, all your past history is also broken. If decentralization fails, then the system collapses now. It doesn't make the system collapse in the past. But with privacy, if it collapses now, it also exposes you in the past. So it's much more complicated and challenging. So that's pretty much the why I got attracted to the
Makes sense. So you mentioned Bitcoin, and there are loads of Bitcoin maximalists out there. Do you think it's because, if you look at from the investment perspective, it's considered to be a safer bet among other cryptocurrencies, or what is it about it that kind of makes it stand out, apart from the fact that it's been the first one?
So I think that the reason that Bitcoin is still maintaining such a dominant position is that Bitcoin is really perhaps the only cryptocurrency that stays true to the original values. So the original purpose and idea of cryptocurrency is that I'm supposed to be able to receive a Bitcoin payment from you, and I'm supposed to be able to validate that payment on my own computer without relying on anybody else or trusting anybody else. So it's maintaining that feature of self-validation. That's why a lot of people think that Bitcoin is a very slow cryptocurrency, but it's also one of the only cryptocurrencies that you can validate 10 years of history on your own laptop. So it's staying true to those original core values of decentralization and that's not only important for trustlessness, but it's also what helps. It's also what helps to users to enforce the other rules of the system. So Bitcoin has the 21 million limit. That's the scarcity cap. That's what makes the asset valuable. But that 21 million cap, it only actually works. It's only real as long as there are people enforcing that rule. If you are trusting the miners to enforce this rule, then at the end of the day, the problem with cryptocurrencies is that it's just software, and anybody can change the software that they're running, and now you've changed the software. So how do you make the rules in the cryptocurrency actually be real? If you want Bitcoin or any cryptocurrency to be comparable to a physical metal, something in the physical world, we are comparing it now with digital gold, for instance. But it's just software. How can you make the rules of this digital element, like this digital natural element, to be real in that way, that the features are as real as something in the physical world? It needs to be so decentralized, and you need to be able to self-validate that no organization or community can come around and change properties of the system.
Yeah.
So I think Bitcoin is pretty much the only asset that really has that level of decentralization that makes it a real. I'm thinking these days that Bitcoin really is like a digital form of gold, and I wouldn't be able to say that if there were 10 organizations that could get together, and it would be really hard to stop them from changing the rules. So I know that some people say that, what about the mining then in Bitcoin? But the miners can't change the 21 million limit in Bitcoin. They can only reorganize the blocks in the blockchain. So it's not a fair comparison to say that I hope that mining becomes more decentralized, and we are seeing projects that are working on that, but the most important feature is that everybody can self-validate the system and enforce the rules of the system.
And it seems to have proven by the time. So
yeah.
So speaking about that, it just reminded me, recently we had different occasions of people claiming to be Satoshi Nakamoto and all these conversations around that. How do you view this? Like, what's your attitude towards all these different people emerging eventually? And do you think it actually matters? Do we really need to find out who the person was or the group of people were? Is it so crucial?
Yeah, to me, it's absolutely, it's a great learning experience, because I get to look and understand that how the human psyche works. Because I never thought that I would see before my own eyes how a group of people that previously were part of the same community that I was part of, become absolutely. It's like I've never understood, for example, the Taliban movement before, but now I'm feeling like I'm starting to see and understand how these movements of people whose ideas differ so greatly from any type of rationality, and they build these own communities where they build their own truths, and they are not willing to look at facts. So something like, Craig Wright has manufactured evidence and posted fraudulent evidence at many, many occasions. And if you speak to people of the BSV community, there are so many people that are still believing that he is Satoshi Nakamoto.
Okay.
So I don't understand, how could you believe that this man who has gone out of his way to disprove that he's Satoshi Nakamoto by proving this fraudulent evidence, I don't understand how it can happen in people's minds that the conclusion would be that he's Satoshi Nakamoto. So that's how I see, it's some weird religious thing that's going on in this community, and it's very interesting, and it's a great learning experience to see, okay, so that can actually happen, and now suddenly I understand why there are so many different weird ideologies and cults
Yeah.
and tribes in the real world that I never understood before. But now that I've seen it in this space, it gives me a better understanding for the rest of the world.
Oh
So
yeah,
very
it's
interesting.
very similar to the community that OneCoin has, and after so much exposure, everyone knows that it's total scam, but it
Yeah.
still functions and it still has a true fans and people who completely deny the proofs of it being a scam. So it's really interesting, and I think probably that kind of brings in the role of the personal branding and marketing and all these non-techy techniques that some people use in order to move forward the hidden agenda.
Yeah, I gotta admit something though, because first time that I saw Craig Wright, I mean he has so the way that he came into this industry was the first time I saw him was on a panel with Nick Szabo, and he was speaking about very arcane details of the Bitcoin protocol. He was speaking about that. So in the scripting language of Bitcoin, there's a stack. It's a stack-based programming language. There is a second stack called the alt stack in the scripting language that you can use, and you can sort of play around with these stacks at the same time, and you can create things that Bitcoin couldn't do before, such as loops. You could build a for loop. That you can do that in a Forth-like language. And I had never heard about the alt stack in the scripting language before. And so when Craig Wright was speaking about this alt stack, and he was very determined and angry when he was discussing this, I felt that it was very strange that somebody would be so emotional about this arcane detail in the very arcane detail in the Bitcoin protocol. And he kept doing this for in his next presentation. He was speaking about things that had happened way back in the past, even before I started looking technically at the project, and he was very upset about those details. So it didn't make sense to me, like, who is this man and why is he so upset about this? And he seems to have a tremendous amount of knowledge of very early stuff in the Bitcoin world. So at that point in time, I was thinking, maybe he was, maybe he was Satoshi Nakamoto. Yeah. And then I started to discuss this with other people, and other people that have told me that. So this is a classic con artist strategy, that you are very abrasive, very angry, and so it's if you wanted to trick people, this is exactly what you would do. But I didn't know that from the beginning. So this is another example of things that I'm learning from being operational in this space, and now I'm learning things about the real world from outside. What's happening here.
Well, I mean, I've been in this space for about 3 years, and I've been involved in different communities for different projects, and also, coming to these events like we are at the AI and Blockchain Summit at Malta, sort of gives you a little bit of image of the vibe and of the main topics and the main style of conversations that people are having in this space. So I feel like the emotional side of things is quite big in this space. People are very emotional, they are very passionate, and non-techie sides of that aspect is quite impactful in the field. So how do you feel about that? Because sometimes in some projects even, the tech side kind of gets diminished because of the other components, which are much louder, much more vivid, and more comprehensive for the masses.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the core thing here is that so cryptocurrencies are communities at the core, and if you are a person and you become influential in a specific community, that's valuable to people. If they have, I mean, that's what we're all looking for, right? We're looking for a place to belong and people that we meet and engage with, and we're trying to change the world together. And if somebody comes around and they're starting to criticize your project, then, I mean, you are really attached to, if you don't feel like you could easily, leave that community and join another community because you spent all that time building up your reputation within one community, then I think that's probably the reason why people are, I don't think that they know it, but it's in a subconscious level that they feel like, don't attract my tribe. And that's why, we see this tribalism in the space. I personally never had this experience myself because I'm, interested in all the tribes, and I'm part of multiple tribes, and I'm just trying to, the one that is the most interesting at the time, I will move to that tribe. So I
Yeah.
don't have this,
So
if
you
somebody.
don't get too attached to one of those.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, probably what people should be doing is that they should be trying to be part of multiple tribes and try to see what they are interested in and not just trying to increase their influence within a specific tribe.
Okay. And looking at the future, I mean, obviously we all want at one point to have mass adoption. We want more projects that bring changes to our everyday lives. We want it to have the internet effect where, people use it without understanding how it works and without needing to understand how it works because we have loads of applications and B2C applications on top of it. When do you think, how long will it take to get to that point? Because now it feels like we are at the level where we are building the infrastructure, the protocols, just the base foundation to have something else coming on top of it. So when do you think people who don't know about blockchain and are not very interested, will actually have some impact on their lives because of that?
Yeah, so I think depending on which element of the industry that you're looking at, they have different possible progressions that they could have. But if we would speak, for example, specifically about Bitcoin, then I think that's easier to reason about. And I think the natural progression here is that, so right now, the problem for Bitcoin is that it's very hard to use as a currency for everyday life because its price gyrations are so volatile, and because Bitcoin, if it is successful at what it should do, it can increase still 100 times more. It creates the incentives for people to hold on to it. It's only at the point where Bitcoin doesn't have those dramatic increases left in it that people would be like, okay, well, I can spend Bitcoin here in the store because Bitcoin could go maybe 2x, but it wouldn't do 100x in the next 5 years.
Yeah.
If it's just 2x, and it's not the end of the world if you happen to have spent those Bitcoins. Right now, it's like a penny stock that you have a very strong faith in, and it could increase.
Everyone is
dramatically.
scared to become the pizza man.
Exactly. So it's only at the point at which Bitcoin can't make these extreme gains anymore. That's the point when people will actually start using it, and that's also the point where people will feel comfortable receiving their salary in it. I think the mass adoption happens when you don't have any fiat currency anymore. You receive your salary in Bitcoin. Now you gotta spend your Bitcoin to survive. So people are worried, like, when are we going to start spending Bitcoin? It's going to happen when Bitcoin is what you receive, because that's what you want to receive and that's what you want to spend.
What you spend on is being accepted as well. If you can pay your bills in Bitcoin, then it will work out as well.
So I mean, it's very hard to put numbers on exactly when this would happen, but I could definitely see it happening. Within the next 5 or 10 years, I could definitely see this happening for Bitcoin. And I personally, I'm already at the point now, because I am, such a cryptocurrency maximalist. I could imagine, receiving my currency in my salary in Bitcoin already today, and it wouldn't take long for me to personally become a spender in Bitcoin. And I think we'll see, this early majority emerging like that also before we see the late majority adoption.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It was a very interesting conversation. What's next for you in the future? Any exciting projects? Anything you're planning?
Yeah, so I've had on my, if you look at my LinkedIn profiles and Twitter profiles, I've had in my description a new thing to be announced. So I have kept it secret for a long time now, but I'm right at the point now. I actually spoke with CoinDesk yesterday, so we're coming out of secrecy now, and what we're doing is we're launching it's me together with a Norwegian company. We are together launching a cryptocurrency fund. So I can't, for marketing rules of funds, I can't speak about the fund, but so that's what I will be doing next.
Amazing. Well, good luck with the fund, and thanks a lot for the time that you spent with us. Thank you.
Thank you.